All right, good evening, everyone. We're going to get our meeting started. So thank you for following our process and trying to keep quiet. So we respect and recognize the First Nations within whose unceded lands the village of Kaslo is situated, including the Tanana, the Snakes, and the Silks people, and the Indigenous and Métis residents of our community. So can I have a motion to adopt the agenda with the addition of, is there any late items? No late items. So that's just a placeholder. So moved by Councillor Brown to adopt as presented, moved and seconded by Councillor Lang. Discussion. All those in favor? Motion is carried. And if there are no errors or omissions, the minutes that the recommendation is that the September 10th council meeting minutes be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor Bird, seconded by Councillor Leafwood. Discussion. All those in favor? Carried. We have one delegation this evening. We have Peter Moynes, who is from Nelson Kootenay Lake Tourism. And welcome, Peter.
Hi, thank you very much for letting me speak with you guys this evening.
All right, so we normally will give is 10 minutes for you to make your presentation, and then we'll allow an opportunity for council to ask questions.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate it. So yeah, as some of you may have seen, I had submitted there our 5-year strategic plan. What I thought I might do is provide a little bit of context as to, even how or why I made it onto the agenda here this evening. So Nelson Kootenay Lake.
Adam Pitcock, what's that?
Mike.
Pardon me?
Oh, there's just a member of the public who isn't muted. And everyone ensure that they're mute if you're online, please?
Okay. Yeah, so every 5 years, Nelson Kootenay Lake Tourism needs to reapply to the ministry to be the governing faction that collects the MRDT tax. I didn't want to put anybody on the spot. Is everyone sort of familiar with the MRDT tax, or should I give a real quick synopsis?
Does council need a summary of what the MRDT is? No.
Okay.
You can go ahead, Peter. Thank you.
Okay, great. So yeah, thank you. So we did reapply this year, and the 5-year strategic has gone in. We've decided, our region has decided to stay at a 2% MRDT tax. We've, had discussions with our accommodators in the region, in Kaslo as well, on the East Shore and in Nelson. And the accommodators did decide to stay at a 2% MRDT. Briefly, I'll just let everybody know that when you stay at 2% MRDT, the only thing that you can do with the money really is market our region. There's no opportunity for destination stewardship or any sort of infrastructure things. It's really just marketing. And as a note, there are the other DMOs in our region, Revelstoke, Fernie, Roslyn, all of those have moved to a 3% MRDT. So I have basically said to all of our members that I was going to start basically a strategic plan to look at what moving to a 3% MRDT might do, what that extra money might be able to be used for. So basically, yeah, in the next coming months, I'm going to start to compile, speak with the other DMOs in our area and see what are some of the strategic things they're doing with that extra 1% of MRDT. Some of those could be, infrastructure, some of those could be transportation. Obviously our region has challenges when it comes to transportation. So I'll just put forth in the coming months some opportunities that would arise from going to a 3% MRDT. just so everybody knows also as well too, there are two streams of funding that come to Nelson Kootenay Lake Tourism. So the MRDT funding and then Destination BC, we also have a co-op funding match. So if Destination BC, we provide them with a strategic plan for the marketing that we'll do for our region. And, you know, if they like our ideas, they'll provide a certain amount of funding, and then we need to go ahead and match that funding. So basically, that's, you know, how Nelson Kootenay Lake Tourism works, and what we are required from the ministry to, you know, to be that governing body that collects the MRDT tax is support from our region, basically. So, you know, for that's why I'm chatting with you folks today. I've done the same on the East Shore and here with council in Nelson. So, yeah, we're hoping that, you know, you'd had a chance to perhaps have a look at the 5-year strategic. Obviously, now we can move to any questions if you have any, but the reality is, I guess, too, is that nothing really will change from years previous. We're basically reapplying at the same 2%. So no real big changes in terms of Nelson Kootenay Lake Tourism and marketing for the next while.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Peter.
Yeah.
Does council have any questions? Questions? I do have one.
Yep.
You had talked about the 3% increase. Is that something that can only be instituted at a renewal period? So it wouldn't be up for discussion until the next 5-year renewal period, or could it be done midstream?
Great question. Yes, it can be done midstream, and that's why it's interesting that it's there is some, you know, some people really do feel strongly about moving to a 3%. Many people feel like, why do we want to give these other regions a more strategic advantage? Really, you know, why do we want to stay at 2% when Revelstoke is at 3%? So yes, we can reapply midstream, and that's why I have told our members and our accommodating partners that I will start to put this information together. And, you know, if there are compelling reasons to go to 3% and everyone agrees with that, well, we can do that within that before that 5-year is up. I hope that made sense. Yeah.
Yes, it did. Thank you. Councillor Bird.
Through the chair. So question I have is, who decides whether to jump up from 2 to 3%?
Well, we would need 51% of our accommodators' votes. So it is an accommodator because the accommodators collect the MRDT tax. It is up to the accommodators. So if 51% of accommodators did want to move to 3%, we could apply to do so. However, I would really, you know, I would never really want to be in that situation. I would really want people to know and understand and believe about moving to the 3%. I would hate to be in a position where, you know, 51% wanted to and 49 didn't. I really, in my discussions with the accommodators, I really got a sense that people didn't want to move to 3% because they didn't know where the money would be spent. It wasn't so much, I mean, there was some sentiment that they didn't want to charge more tax, but you know, as many people, you know, they don't want to charge people more tax and not know where the money is going to go. So that I really felt was the barrier between, you know, those that wanted to stay at 2 and those that wanted to move to 3. So that's my goal, is to give them solutions and ideas so that we wouldn't even move to 3% if we didn't have a plan to move to 3%. And that's how, when I've spoken with our other DMOs in the region, that's exactly what Revelstoke did. They said they actually got a grant to go ahead and produce a document that would allow people to understand what it would be like to move to 3%, what type of, you know, increase in revenues those would be, and where those revenues could be spent. So that's definitely for sure. We would not move without there being a strategic plan for doing so.
Thank you. Councillor Leaflet.
Through the chair. Is Kaslo on its own? Like when you talk about our area, do you mean Kaslo and like the communities up the lake, or just Kaslo
No.
by itself, Denver by itself?
Oh, no, so our region, just so you know, so we encompass Nelson Kootenai Lake encompasses
Right.
Nelson, Kaslo, and the East Shore, basically. So that is our catchment. So yes, it would need to be, you know, everyone that's an accommodator in Kaslo would have the, you know, the same ability to put forth their motion and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I speak as our entire region as a whole. Yeah.
Councillor Brown.
Through the chair. I'm wondering what would the council's role be in this moving forward?
So the role would be if council agreed is just a letter of support saying as such. Yeah, and that's what we're asking for. Yeah.
Okay, I have one further follow-up. If, is it just up to the accommodators, whether they wish to go forward with the 3%, or do you have to come back to the local government who is supporting and offering these letters of support to let them know that this is occurring?
Yes, yeah, it would be the same process to my knowledge is exactly what we're doing now. Yeah, yeah, we would do the same. It would be the same thing. We would, if we've decided, okay, we're going to move to 3%, we would be having this same meeting again. So yeah, everyone would have their chance and their input you know, to let us know what you thought.
All right, so if there are no more questions. Oh, did you have another thing?
Oh, I just wanted to add, please, that if you ever have questions, you know, we don't have to end the discussion here. So, you know, Catherine has my email. Please reach out to me at any time if you have questions or concerns or comments or anything like that. I wouldn't want, you know, the discussion to end here. So if you think of something later, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. Well, regular
Okay.
business hour time. If you can.
All right, well, thank you very much for your time tonight, Peter, and for providing us with this information.
I appreciate your time as well, too. Thank you for listening to me. I appreciate it.
I
Okay,
just only
have a
one
good night.
section of this that I
Thank
want to
you.
hear that Laura told us about.
All right, we still have a member of the public who's online who is not muted. You got it? Okay, thank you. All right. So now we will move into council reports. So there are written reports from myself, from Councillor Bird and Councillor Brown. Were there reports from any other members of council, or do you have questions regarding any of the reports? Councillor Heathwood.
To the chair. So your report on the meeting with the childcare
Yes.
thing, when they broke down the increase in ECB, did they do it by urban and rural or just? Because oftentimes we have a hard time finding people that have the EC certificate, so.
No, they haven't really broken it down. They're looking at overall. And as I put in my report, because we're in the election period or getting close to the election period, there wasn't a lot they could say.
Right.
The information that I scanned and was part of the report was what they could say, because that's already happening. But it sounded like they had some things that they wanted to move forward on, but they couldn't share that information because it could have been making political statements, or it was the position of the current government and they couldn't say anything, unfortunately. So, yeah. Thanks. Councillor Booth.
Yes, through the chair. So regarding your report, there was you mentioned a September 9th Housing Initiatives Committee meeting under the auspices of CBT, Columbia
Yes.
Basin Trust.
Yes, and I can't speak about it. I'm just referencing it that I was attending it on behalf of as a CBT board member, but anything that I can release is put into the report that CBT has, and I've gotten it since the agenda cut off, so it'll go on the next meeting. And that's just the nature of that organization, that I can let you know what committees I'm on and what the names of them are, but I'm not allowed to share content.
Follow up, so, content, and this, once decisions are made, it gets, released to the public. How?
It would be on the CBT website. There would be news releases put out. So, and if you're got Facebook page, you could share, like log on and see anything that they share on Facebook. And a lot of things do get published in papers as well, but mostly I think it's online. So. Yep, no, I did reference Councillor Brown's report because I did see it. Yeah. All right. So then our next item is committee minutes. We've got the minutes from the Recreation Grant Committee. Those are just received for information. And our next item is the CAO report. And thank you, CAO Brown, for Baker, sorry, looking at Councillor Brown on the screen. Thank you, CAO Baker, for the written copy.
Welcome. Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. So council can expect a third quarter report, hopefully for the next council meeting. And it would include financial projections through year end. Staff are in the process of reviewing the recommendations from the Liquid Waste Management Committee. And we'll be having a staff meeting tomorrow morning. And then on October 21st, another meeting with the committee itself. Talk about the recommendations that they put forward back in November 2023. Parks, we have the Baseball Softball Association had improvements that are underway at the park. So installation of a scoreboard, electrical, and a fence in the outfield. And the remaining work, which is the dugouts, has not started yet, but that's outside of the village's scope. So not too sure when the association will have those dugouts installed. The campground, you'll recall that there was concern with the camperdown elm. So I'm happy to report that we had an arborist come out and take a look, and they said that they're not concerned about the health of the elm, but could have been a bug or it could have been heat stress that affected it earlier in the year. So if the bug comes back and can be seen on the leaves, then we're going to give the arborist a call and tell them to come check it out. But in the meantime, the elm is safe. Regional Growth Management Plan. There's an engagement plan that's been developed, as well as a draft of an online survey. And there's been discussion about how to involve council with this management plan. No decisions have been made, but like Kaslo, the other participating communities have council that's also interested in participating. So stay tuned and we'll keep you in the loop. Strategic planning, I believe you're all aware that we have a meeting scheduled for October 20th. And the plan would be to obviously review strategic priorities that are in progress as part of your plan, as well as provide you with a service level review. So you can have some time to think about whether you want to keep things the way they are, increase services, make reductions, and then staff can take all of that information away to draft a budget for 2025. And the goal would be to have a draft for January. Protective services, we have our Fire Smart program that performed 32 home assessments in the village from May through October. 2 of those, or as well as 2 bear land assessments, and one of those was in our wildfire development permit area. Downtown is applying to be a Fire Smart neighborhood, which would then give us 2 neighborhoods within the village. 2024 community funding and supports funding has been approved. So that means we have funding all the way through the end of the year. And then before the end of the year, we'll be applying for 2025. Capital project updates. There's a few. The Active Transportation Network Plan has conducted interviews with 2 elected officials. There's a questionnaire that went out to the school in September and an online survey and virtual workshop planned for October. Front Street Park, You might have noticed that there's construction fence that's been put up, so some excavation has begun. And we're applying pressure on the contractor to get that work completed before the snow flies. So there's no real part of that project that we're concerned about that, would really be affected by cold weather. So things should be completed in the fourth quarter here. And final update, we ordered the snow blower attachment. So we're hoping to have that here in Kaslo and in use for the upcoming snow season. Thank you, Mayor Hewitt.
Thank you. Are there any questions for CEO David? Councillor Leafwood.
through the chair. Have the accessibility committee members been contacted by the active transportation network consultant?
Accessibility committee.
I know that contact information was provided, but I don't know beyond that, so we can find out.
And just another note for the public, because there were people writing in earlier in the year about RAF. So the Wall Safe Coordinator is having a presentation at the arena next Tuesday on RAF, if anybody wants to come. I'm not quite sure the time, but it's upstairs in the mid.
Thanks. Can you forward details to staff so they could post that on the website? Yep, that'd be great. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Bird.
That's, I'm curious about the, if there have been expressions of interest or proposals for the initial development of the South Kaslo, that large area of land on the west side of the highway. And I know that went out to tender, and I assume the tenders are closed and we get some good applicants, and any timelines on that one?
Through the chair, yes, closed, I think it closed Monday, my memory's correct. We have a few proposals that were submitted, which is good. And staff are going to assess the proposals and come back at the October 22nd council meeting to provide you with more information. But definitely receive proposals.
Any questions? All right, thanks very much. And then we've got several items of correspondence. I won't list them all, and the circulation package. Are there any items that council would like to pull? Councillor Brown. Oh, can't hear you.
I would like to pull item 5.4.12, the South Beach open house request, please.
Right, and Councillor Leafwood.
The chair, 5.4.4, they fall on the netting, and also 5.4.5, the Bear Smart Working Group.
Okay, any others? Councillor Bird.
The RDCK commission appointments, I'm just assuming that'll be on the agenda next week. Okay, then I don't need to talk about it. And also the mobile vendors bylaw review. Was wondering when that's likely to get looked at and discussed at the table.
That's just a general question that has
Yeah.
arisen because of the two items of correspondence.
Yeah.
Right, so I will start at the top, so then you don't need discussion. That wasn't me. Nope. You didn't need discussion on the RDCK appointments then?
No, so those are just for information at this point. They'll come back for resolutions for appointments, but this was to give everybody advance notice that if there is interest, there are vacancies available.
Right, and then Councillor Leafwood, 5.4.4.
Right, so I think that the ultimate responsibility with the netting should lie with the village, as it is our facility. And even though baseball does use it quite a bit, it still is our facility that is used by lots of different activities. So my suggestion would be that we invite the baseball group to a meeting as well as our strategic manager of strategic initiatives and try to come up with a phased plan together to try and figure out some kind of netting or phase of netting, and then we could start looking at where some funding could come from.
So do you want to refer that to strategic planning then? Because that, okay, because that probably their next meeting
Yeah.
that's coming up, and it would be a good opportunity to have a
Yeah,
better discussion on that. All right, thank you. And Kaslo Bear Smart Working Group.
right. So we did get fairly far with becoming a Bear Smart community. There's only one thing left that we needed to do, which was the human conflict assessment. So I would like to see us finish that off and become a Bear Smart community. So that could also be either referred to strategic initiatives or also, or to the budget.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then,
This,
sorry,
through the chair, on that point, yeah, reading that, it seems like great idea. I have no idea what kind of request for budget, like what's the plan? What does it mean to implement the Bear Smart Bear Human Conflict Management Plan? So you would like to see that it would be implemented, but I have no idea what implementation would look like or how much it would cost.
response, Councillor
Through the chair. I believe that we hire someone to do the assessment and come up with a plan. And then from there, like part of, we have done some of the work, like we've got created animal attractant bylaws. So I think it's mostly a plan that would, you know, what are the ways that we're reducing bear human conflict? So I'm not quite sure how far into implementing it, but we need to have the plan first, and then we go from there.
So perhaps the best it would be to refer it to strategic planning or budget, and in the meantime, have staff reach out to see, because I think they have in mind who would do that work, and then we could get a cost estimate. And then we have figures before
Right.
us. So does that can that just be a direction to staff? Thank you.
No.
I think it's yeah, I think she was referenced in the document.
Yeah.
All right, and again, mobile vendors, that is just under the business licensing bylaw, is it not?
It is, and I think that that's likely something to refer to strategic planning to figure out where on the priority list which comes in.
Are you fine with that, Councillor Bridge? Okay. All right, and then Councillor Brown.
Through the chair. I would like to propose a open house or a town hall meeting regarding Kaslo South. There's clearly a lot of community interest in this. And I think that we have had one opportunity through the proposed developer, but I think there would be a great value in the village itself and council sitting down with all community members who are of interest to hear their thoughts and to be able to continue dialogue prior to moving forward with any next steps.
I'm going to look to staff to see if there is what kind of timeline we could realistically be looking at for something like that. If that is something that we would entertain or be able to entertain. Go ahead.
I think it's going to take a little bit of research on our part to determine whether it is an option, because the legislation around holding public hearings for things that behave like public hearings has recently changed. And we want to make sure that anything that we're doing is compliant with provincial legislation. But that's just my piece on the rules, and I think we may have other.
Yeah, the hurdle might be the residential zoning. So when there's residential zoning now, you're not allowed to have a public hearing in certain instances. You have to see how this applies since it's residential and potentially recreational commercial. And there's another, you have to forgive me, but there's another opportunity for there to be public input. And I believe it's at the time when if council decides to dispose of the land through the land exchange, then there's might be an opportunity at that point prior to it all being finalized for public input to be received. And so perhaps staff can ask that be given time to provide you with options and report back at the next council meeting.
Does that work for you, Councillor Brown? Because it would take some time to put together, you know, to go through those items of correspondence and try to collate all the information that's, you know, being requested or what we think that the public may want to know. So does that work for you for staff to come back to the next meeting with those answers?
Yeah, you know, that would work for me. I would just say that I do feel that this is incredibly important, and I see that there are perhaps some impediments to being able to make it happen. But I would also suggest that it would be in the best interest of our community to find a way to work through those impediments to ensure that we are able to hear the concerns or inspirations that our citizens have around this really important topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Leafwood.
To the chair. Until, you know, we can figure out how to move forward, what is the best way for the public to get information right now? I mean, I know that we were putting correspondence in a folder, but I've had a few people ask, without having to go to each council meeting agenda, like what's the best way to access all the information that we have?
We don't have a package at this point that's ready for the public. The versions that are in the file folder are the unredacted versions. And so before that gets released, it would certainly require staff to go through and apply the redactions to that version because we're keeping the unredacted versions for our records. The versions that have appeared in the council packages are fully redacted to remove personal information. So it's not impossible. It just hasn't been done at this point. It's going to take a couple of hours to produce that, but if that's something that council feels would be valuable, it's within our capacity to do that.
The mapping and those kind of things like that would be available. Like
that is, there is a rather comprehensive report kind of running to 50 pages that would be in one agenda package.
Right.
So that one is my suggestion there is go to that agenda package. And if there are members of the public that they're looking for that, I can point you in the direction. So at least you're not poking around in all of them.
So is there, as a follow-up to that, is there a public facing spot that what I'm hearing Councillor Leaf would ask is that can that be created now? And even if that's the only thing that lives in there at this point, then the public knows that it's fairly easily accessible rather than digging down through all of the information, because I know on the public side, it's all one big long PDF.
Yeah. I could create a dedicated web page that would have the information for the proposed development and post information there. There will be a bit of a lag because there's always additional stuff coming in. So it's always, you know, I think I have everything redacted and up there. And then as soon as before I'm done, another message is coming in. So there may be gaps. It may not be fully up to date, but for the bulk of the material, I think we could do that with relatively minimal effort.
Thank you. So just understanding that staff
Yeah.
has other things
Yeah.
that are on their plate. So if we can work
yeah,
with you know, in the next 2-week timeline, and then perhaps we'll know more as well after that, after next meeting. All right, thank you. All right, and so then all of the other correspondence has been received. So we come to question period. And generally we allow 15 minutes, and for questions from the public. And they are not to be directed to individual council members. It's either myself or staff who would answer questions. And because there's quite a few people in the room, it would be preferable not to make long statements, because then that affects the time that others have to ask questions. So are there any questions from the public? I'll go online first, and no, I can't. Okay, so I can't. How do I get Councillor Brown unpinned so I can see the public better?
Okay. Participants show on the right hand side.
I did try to bring it in. Oh, there we go.
Okay.
All right.
Maybe
So if you
raise
could
hands.
use the raise hand function if you're online and you want to ask a question. Otherwise, I will go to the room. I am not seeing any hands raised. No, I'm going online first. So I had indicated I was going online first, so now I will go to the room, and so I see Jimmy and then Laura so far. And Russell. Okay. Oh, sorry, and Dawn, you were hiding back there. Okay, Jimmy.
Great, thanks. So just in case anybody doesn't know, I'm Jimmy Holland, and I'm not a resident of Kaslo, but for the last 50 years, I've been pretty involved in the community. So I guess right off the top, I'm here to speak about the public or a public meeting. I don't think it needs to be a full-blown hearing, and certainly there must be method for you to fly under any kind of regulatory obligations around the hearing. The developer had no problem coming into town. He didn't have to meet any legislative regulations in order to be able to have his say. And the only access the community has to speak to this issue is through some sort of public format. The top-down information that we can get by going to the website and everything doesn't really serve the community and being able to communicate amongst ourselves and get good feedback. My impetus around this is in reading the OCP. I went through a few things. There's lots of language in there about how to develop land and say things. There's one thing in particular that I found pretty interesting. Section 9.3 under policies. Item 4, the village will preserve the public lands along the lakefront and riverfront areas for parks, trails, public use. So I don't see much room in there for selling land on the lakeshore front to a developer in order to achieve a development purpose. The area that's proposed to be developed is 40% village land. And I think in the interest of what the community has put in, to the in their things is to go with that. And it seems, because this is a little bit in contradiction of the policies that are stated in the OCP, that it would warrant a day for the community to come together, have the rationale explained in a two-way format, where you can get the feedback and put the information out, and let the community understand what the council's thinking is on this. There may be a really good explanation of why you would dispose of your public land on the lake shore. But there needs to be that opportunity in an open
Okay.
space.
So you're just reiterating the request that we've already got in motion for a public meeting.
I'm
And then
trying
we're
to
looking at
substantiate that from the
Yeah.
public feedback.
All right,
Right.
thank you. All right, Laura.
Yeah, Laura Douglas, and I really appreciate all of that you brought up. That issue, because I read it in the Nelson Star, and then I freaked out, and then I found out how to do it at Catherine. And so it'd be awesome if there could be a folder, and I wondered in that folder, there could also be the letters of support and the letters from the community, so that someone wouldn't have to go through all of the minutes to figure out what people are asking questions about. And so you answered my question basically. But the other question I have is I understand some things need to be in camera, and I don't know how this will work. When do we get to find out what the things you have talked about in camera, like is there a news release, or how do we find out like the disposition of land and the sale? Like, and also, I guess another question, what's the process of reading 1, 2, 3, reading 1, 2, 3? It feels like there's two parts, the zoning and then the selling of the land. So those are my questions.
So as far as disposition of land, there's a requirement for us to advertise that, so in a publication. So that will, you would have to watch that, we're not gonna, other than in a publication and
And
probably
one-
on the bulletin board.
And in that folder. we want it. So our standard, we would put it as a notice on the village's website. We would also put it as a notice on the bulletin boards inside and outside of City Hall, and we would run it in a newspaper, either the Valley Voice or the Pennywise, depending on, usually it depends on deadlines. Okay.
And I'll just say, people think that when we advertise things like that, like leases and sale, that's just, it's a done deal, but
Yeah.
that is just to announce that this is what we're proposing. And it could lead to further discussion from the public. And regarding first, second, third reading, first reading just gets it on the agenda for discussion. We can't do anything with a project until a bylaw, until it gets first reading. And second reading goes a step further, but once we go to third, we cannot make changes unless we rescind third reading, and then we can go back. So up until second reading, we could make changes to the bylaw in question. And Catherine could correct me if I'm wrong, but once we go to third, then the assumption is that we would go to adoption at the next meeting, but we don't do third and adoption at the same meeting.
There's some rules around that. It's a little bit different for OCPs and zoning bylaws. But I think that the gist of it is that there is going to be public notice about how this project moves forward, if that's what council decides to do. And I will add that the bylaws do have to always be considered in open meeting. They can't be in closed.
Okay, great. All right, and Russell.
Russell Precious, I'm a Kaslo citizen, and I'm also speaking on behalf of holding an open house. I think, like many of us here, we were totally surprised to find out that the city actually owned a significant portion of the land in question. And my question to council is, what other options have we considered in terms of choosing the route we've gone on? It would obviously be a huge burden for the city of Kaslo, the village of Kaslo, to purchase the land that's owned by the developer. However, I can say to you that within our ongoing exploration with other options, we have people now who would be willing to buy out the developer. So that would not place the burden on the village. And I would also just add that this is such a huge legacy decision for this council that it really warrants, more input from the people of this round. So, yeah.
Thank you, Russell.
Thank you.
All right, and Dawn.
Thank you. I wanted to just ask if other levels of government have been consulted in the processes that you followed so far with regard to this position of the southeast beach property, or environmental professionals, or perhaps environmental groups in any way, and basically to suggest that that would be a possibility. But very importantly, the Tanaka or other indigenous groups via the Kootenai partnership, because that is shoreline, and the partnership does have specific requirements for propositions like this along the shoreline of the lake. So it's more just asking that if these things haven't been done, that they be put on your agenda to at least consider doing them. It would seem wise to cover all bases.
I'll take a stab at it and then let staff go. I don't think we have to consult with other orders of government regarding the process, other than the legality of what we're doing. And regarding the protection areas, our OCP, I think, was designed with those setbacks in mind, because we are a participant in the Kootenai Lake Partnership. So I'll make sure that we did not do anything that was not part of the Kootenai Lake Partnership's plan. I can't remember, it was that. Pardon me?
Environmental consultants.
Yeah, I'll let CAO Baker take that one, but I believe that there is a requirement that happens at different stages through the process.
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. I hate to say it, but there is some good information on the website inside the staff reports on the environmental assessments that were required to be performed. So the developer would pay for the cost of those, and it was a requirement of this draft agreement coming together. And it's in part why there's a 30-meter riparian area along the river in which it needs to be left natural, other than a walkway for the public to access down along the river. And then ultimately along the lake shore, where there's a 15-meter setback, environmental setback, which is also reflected in our lakefront development permit area. So there can't be any construction or construction within that 15-meter area. And with respect to the property, the core property in the floodplain, all of that is subject to the environmental assessment as well. So the professionals have detailed what's required of the developer if they want to develop the land into an RV park.
Okay, last question. Yeah.
No, thank you. Regarding, okay, I'm concerned about riparian area, especially. I'm concerned about the whole business. But when I go down there and I see those survey stakes and they say 15 meters from the lake, is that this year's high water? Because this is a very low high water year. And so that's, do you know?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Hewitt. So a surveyor determines where the natural boundary of the lake is. And it's fairly easy to do when you have a bird's eye view, because you can see where all the wood has kind of been piled up. And where the grass starts to begin and trees are growing. So it's kind of, especially if you kind of go on a Google Earth or Google Maps, you'd be able to see where that natural boundary is. And although the lake is going to fluctuate from year to year, that natural boundary seems to be, fairly permanent. It's certainly water might get higher, but it gives us a pretty good idea. The surveyor then determines where is the natural boundary and determines where the 15 meters setback is. So notwithstanding kind of that gray area where you kind of determine the natural boundary, nothing is going to get built within that 15 meters. And the plan of the developer is to not develop anything from that point all the way up to the fence where their RV park begins. So it's much more than 15 meters from the lake shore that would be undisturbed.
Okay, because it seems to me, and I don't know, but will the village own the land to the north, to the south of those survey stakes as you're going along the river? Or is the village giving the land, that riparian area, to the developer? In that swap that I kind of know. Because that riparian area should be known as that.
There you are. So there's a couple of pieces of land within the riparian area for the river that would become village property. So
Within. Okay.
the village owns a lot of the land within that 30-meter riparian zone. And there's a couple of pieces that we would then own. So we would own the entire strip from the highway, so to speak, all the way along the river. And then And where the river and lake shore meet, kind of in that little bit of a triangle, village would own all of that.
But doesn't the village, what will the village be swapping? This, the streets and all of those areas, I guess, that,
Yes.
okay.
So, I think you're asking the questions that we want that, like, I think we've got to cut it off now. I know it's very good information that you're asking, but if we're gonna do, some form of public meeting,
Yes, we're
we
going
can
to do, and if you're not going to do some sort of formal meeting, how do we learn these things? Aside from, I guess, the website or.
So, council has discussed many of these things in open meetings, and undoubtedly it will come up again because council has had similar questions to what have been asked by the public. Because we are also residents and we are curious about these things. This is the first time that we've gone through such a comprehensive process as this, so that's why it's taking a while, and it may seem like it's taking a while, but because we need to have all the information. It's council's role to reserve decision until we feel we have all of the information in front of us. And if we don't have all the information, it is our responsibility to ask staff to get that information that we might be lacking to make an informed decision. So that's why we're still going through the process.
Yes.
And we don't know yet where it's all going to take us, because one thing leads to another, is what we're finding, as well as, we're getting information as well. You just got to watch when it comes up on the agenda, and there's nothing stopping any members of the public from logging in on Zoom and hearing the discussions or showing up in person. But,
And so, excuse me, so the rezoning issue is going to be on the next agenda?
I'm not sure yeah. We're still gathering information on that. Okay. All right. Okay, well, thank you for your questions and your attention, and thank you for being so respectful tonight. So we're now going to move into the business portion of our meeting. First one is, if anyone wants to take this opportunity to leave, I'll let you do that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We can manage that later. Be like, well, we'll manage that later.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, so our first item of business is the permissive tax exemption bylaw. And it's to consider the bylaw for the 2025 year, and the recommendation is that the permissive tax exemption bylaw 1306 2024 be adopted. Okay, seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Change my view again so I can see you, Councilor Brown. And next item is the temporary street closure request from the Kootenai Mushroom Festival. And it's to consider whether to grant the street closure. So the recommendation is that a portion of 5th Street south of A Avenue between the Langham and the Legion be temporarily closed to traffic from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday, October 12th, 2024 for the 3rd annual Kootenai Mushroom Festival. Okay, moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Bird. Any discussion? All those in favor? That motion is carried. 7.3 temporary license of occupation for the Kaslo Remote Control Club. So the recommendation is that a temporary license of occupation be issued to the Kaslo Remote Control Club for a one-year term to permit their occasional use of lands at the Kaslo Aerodrome. Moved by Councillor Bird, seconded by Councillor Leaflet. Any discussion? Councillor Lang.
Can staff, through the chair, can staff tell me when the 1 year is? Like, what's the start date and the end date?
It's in October 1st to October 1st.
Okay, so we're talking about coming up the current year. Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? That motion is carried. Next item is the Green and Inclusive Community Buildings Program grant application for the library. So this is to consider a request from the Kaslo District Public Library for the Village of Kaslo to apply for a Green and Inclusive Community Building Grant Program for funding to construct a new library. CAO Baker has done a comprehensive report on that, and so are there any questions regarding that? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm wondering, how much would remain if we allocate $318,000 to the library and the Community Works Fund? How much would be remaining? And I'm wondering if this is something that we could refer to strategic planning, when we have our meeting, later this month.
So it isn't from Community Works, it's from the Growing Communities Fund. The 318, the 50,000 was from Community Works.
So for the 318,000 portion, what would be remaining were we to dedicate those funds towards this?
I don't know whether staff's had a chance to look at what was remaining, but there definitely is funding in that available, because when the last time that they had applied, we had applied for a grant on behalf of the library. There was the same commitment for covering the shortfall, which was greater at that time because they continued to do fundraising. So the commitment is less than it was for the last funding application. Does that work for you? That answer? It's true.
Sure. Yeah, I would be curious to find out what we would be left over with at some point, but that is sufficient for now. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Leco.
Chair, and also the grant application has to be in by October 16th, I believe. So we couldn't wait until the strategic session.
Yeah. It's just the way the funding opportunity came up. It was after our last meeting or just before. So there wasn't time to get it developed for the last meeting that we had in September. So they've been working with staff here to put the application together. And yeah, all right, Councillor Bird.
Yep, through the chair. So the deadline for this to submit a grant application is October 16th. And what I noticed in the instructions or in our staff report was there's an assumption once you have submitted that grant application that there will be no changes to the design. So a while ago, the library board agreed to put an expression of interest for partnerships. So I haven't heard anything about that. I'm assuming that idea was brought up. We voted on it in council and it has apparently died. So this is, I've got a few concerns about this, and I know I'm coming into this late, that this has been an ongoing project of council for years before I got on, but I'm looking at a $5 million plus building, which I find is quite expensive, because having just put up a building for 4.2 with 10 kitchens and 10 bathrooms. I'm just wondering, why is a one-story single purpose building gonna cost 5 million? But that aside, it does concern me that we're looking at, through this grant, making this promise that not only would we be covering ineligible expenses and shortfall, but that through the RDCK, under an agreement not yet discussed, we would be looking at covering the operating expenses to some extent going forward, not to mention the asset management of that building. So there are a lot of expenses that we don't have in front of us, and we're being asked to decide this today. Finally, I'm kind of wondering why the choice of taking the money out of the community works and out of the growing communities fund, when if I look at the 2023 annual report, there's 269,000 and change in the library reserve. What's the point of that reserve if not to spend it on a library?
So I'll answer the last one first. That reserve fund is being held, and that's one of the line items in that budget. Those funds are going to be used towards the project. That it's just being held, that reserve is being held by the village on behalf of the library.
So the request to the village for the 319,000 plus 50,000 plus ongoing shortfalls in operations and asset management, that request to us is in addition to something, to the amount that we've already pledged, which is that 269,000 in the reserve.
That isn't our funding. That was money donated to the library, and although that it's library money. It's not village money.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah. So I don't know where to introduce the other topic we had talked about earlier today. Is the other option is if this is unsuccessful, is to go immediately to borrow to construct the library. And staff has done a little bit of preliminary research on that. And can you speak to that at all?
Mayor Hewitt, so, council's been given a recommendation on how to make it work using money that's currently in our possession, these two grants. And fairly easy to proceed in that way. If council was looking for an alternative for funding, could borrow the money. So up to, in this case, $368,000 might be borrowed. Certainly we would ask for more than that because might need it. The process though for borrowing would be an initial 6 months in order to get it approved, and then a further 4 months in order to have it secured and funding distributed to us. So let's say we're lucky, about 10 months. And that can be accommodated within the timeline. So if council supports the grant application, it's going to take a number of months before the building committee hears back that they've been successful or not. And during that time, the village can try to get this borrowing in place. And then when the grant application is approved, the village, if it's approved, then the village can decide to confirm its loan and then use that money to contribute it to the project rather than using existing funds.
That's really good.
Chair, just to clarify a couple of questions.
Chair.
Sorry, through the chair. The expression of interest is still on the table. We talked about it at our recent library meeting, but because this grant came up so fast, and that was initially trying to get the money to build the library in the first place. So we wanted to just go through the process of applying for the grant. And then we'll see from there, but the expression of interest is still on the table. But there wouldn't be time for anything, to plan anything within the time limit of this grant. Also, the library is paid for through taxation to through like different communities, like who use the library. It's not only the village of Kaslo, right? So it wouldn't be the village of Kaslo that would be funding the library. The library is a service throughout the RDCK, so it won't only be the village of Kaslo funding that. And I think as far as asset management, I mean, we like are required to look after all of our assets. But it would be a new one.
Follow up. The line that gets me is that once the grant application has been submitted, no changes to the design are possible, so we're looking at locking yourself into a single purpose building. Or we are being asked to agree that that's going to be the future of that building, is the $5 million proposition that's on the table here.
That's correct. But when the land was purchased almost 3 years ago, it was with the intent that it sole use was going to be for a library, and there has been no one expressing any hint of wanting to do anything else in conjunction with the library. So the CBT granted the funds to purchase it for a library, and that's how we've been proceeding since that time.
Follow up through the chair. That aside, I still find it incredibly expensive building with no opportunity to make it somewhat less expensive. I find that an incredible amount of money for a one-story building.
Well, I haven't been part of, well, I've been part of it, but not the detail on the design, but I believe it's because it's going to be a very highly efficient building. That's why it's really an inclusive building, because they put in a lot of work, and some of the funding can go towards money that's already been expended. So funds that they put forward towards the planning, it's covering that as well. So it's money that's already been spent. It can be recovered through the grant and through that. So that's part of it. Yeah.
Here, Sheila, thank you. So just to clarify, the design of the building can change. That's totally permitted. It's just that the cost estimate assumes there would be no change in design. There's a 15% contingency for unforeseen costs, but it assumes the design doesn't change. So the design can change. It's just that the incremental cost of the design changes would need to be paid for from outside of this grant funding opportunity. And with respect to the budget, so the budget includes in-kind services such as staff time, as well as money that's already been expended for design services, and a healthy contingency and an allowance for cost escalations to occur. Given that this is, being projected into the future, it's not occurring now. And so, if we have a 15% contingency on a $5 million project, then that's $750,000 in contingency, which would bring your construction costs potentially down to 4.25 million. And then there's something like 250,000 in there for in-kind services, staff time from the library in the village, so the construction cost comes down if you're gonna start comparing, kind of apples to apples.
Right. Any other questions before I read the recommendation? Do you have a question, Councillor Brown?
Yes, through the chair. Just wondering if all, in reference to what Councillor Bird was bringing up, if all of the expenses that we can reasonably be able to anticipate are understood. I'm always somewhat hesitant to vote on, I am in support of the project. I'm actually very in support of the project. I'm always hesitant to vote on things when there's very short amount of time turnaround and when there might be certain budgetary implications that we don't understand at the moment. So I guess I just like some sort of assurance that we do understand all the budgetary implications, that we can reasonably, at this time.
They were pretty well covered in the CAO's report on it. Were there any specifics that Dottie outlined pretty well what could be anticipated in the foreseeable future, but yet we don't know what we don't know. So I think, like I said, I think the CAO Baker's report did a very good job of capturing everything that he could foresee that might be a cost in the future that would have to be covered, and approaches towards dealing with that. So we will have to discuss it with at our North Kootenay Lake Services Committee, because the library is jointly funded by Kaslo and portions of Area D. So it would also be through Director Watson and the regional district. And you can see in there that there is a commitment by Director Watson to $75,000 in community works funding from hers. So there's already been cooperation there. So, and the taxation, like I said, would be borne by both Kaslo and portions of Area D.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I'll read the recommendation that an application be submitted to the Green and Inclusive Community Buildings Grant Program for construction of the Kaslo District Public Library, and that the village commit to funding any shortfall as detailed in the staff report titled Grant Application Green and Inclusive Community Buildings, dated September 27th, 2024. Subject to an operational agreement being in place with the Regional District of Central Kootenay before the contribution agreement is finalized, and that $50,000 from Community Works Fund be allocated to the Kaslo District Public Library construction project in the 5-year financial plan, 2025 to 2030, and that $318,000 from the Growing Communities Fund be allocated to the Kaslo District Public Library construction project in the 5-year financial plan, 2025 to 2030. Moved by Councillor Leaflet, seconded by Councillor Lang. Any further discussion? Okay, and all those in favor? Okay, opposed? And negative vote recorded?
Please don't.
You don't have to, but I have to ask you.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so that motion passes. And we had no late items. So the recommendation is that council now recess and reconvene in camera with the public excluded under sections 19(1)(a) and E of the community charter to consider matters relating to personnel and land disposition. Okay, moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Bird. All those in favor? Good night. Carries? Yeah. Yeah, I hope you're feeling better.